All right, so now for topic number two, we're going to take a closer look at semiconductors and how they are impacting the cars and vehicle market at the moment. So I do have some pretty cool slides here. First, I got this nice information from Semiconductor Industry Association. If you want to learn a little bit about the semiconductor industry, I do believe they share a few research reports here and there. They kind of talk a little bit about global sales in chips for by end market for 2022. So while we've known how much money has come into the semiconductor market in total sales for 2022, I don't think we really had a true breakdown of industries. So the new data breaks down the industries of 2022, and we can see obviously the two biggest players are communication and PC computers. Communication comes in with roughly 30% of the market. PC computers come in with like 26%. And then the other small players are auto, consumer, and industrial. And we just took a closer look at Micron. We did see that, hey, Micron was able to show a 5% year over year growth on their auto industry. We can see the auto market growing as well. We also see the industrial market growing as well. And just a quick reminder to investors, even though 2022 was a downturn in forms of a lot of semiconductor companies, in total sales, it was still up 3.3% year over year. So that's also great to remember. We did see that, hey, the biggest drops came from the PC and the computer market, a lot of kind of consumer electronics, especially in the PC side, as many people probably bought a lot of laptops and kind of computers during COVID due to hybrid and working from home lifestyle.
I want to thank the Motley Fool for sponsoring this video, and check out fool.com/Jose for the 10 best stocks to buy now. With that link, you get a promotional offer for their subscription service. Now, let's continue with today's episode.
If we take a closer look at the next slide I have presented, we can kind of see future growth opportunity. So this was an ASML 2022 investor presentation, and they do share who their sources are here. But one thing that we are familiar is by 2030, we expect the total semiconductor market to jump to over $1 trillion. ASML was a little bit more bullish. They were closer to 1.1 trillion. Remember, we weren't even at 600 million this year at the end of 2022. It is impressive, in my opinion, that the three main markets, and these are the fastest growing markets, are going to be at least half of that total revenue. So automobile will be roughly 150 million, servers and data center solutions will be roughly 250 million, and industrials will be 160 million. So roughly 560 million, so about half, is coming from those three industries. The one that's expected to see the most compounded annual growth rate is the automobile industry, with 14% for the next from 2021 to 2030, followed by data centers with 13% during that time frame, and followed by industrial with 12%. So I want to say, if there's any semiconductor investors that are definitely looking for some form of growth opportunities, I want to say always take a closer look, and maybe these are three segments that you might want to focus on. So we saw that the automobile industry is the fastest growing. We heard from Micron that it was one of their biggest growing in forms of percentage wise compared to the rest of the market. So I wanted to get a little bit more information of what we're seeing here. And one of those is the EV market. And I just kind of want to highlight some recent news. Ford CEO recently says that the batteries are the main constraints to EV transitions. So when looking at kind of maybe future opportunities in the EV market, or the automobile market, I think maybe looking at certain companies that deal with the battery side might be another one to kind of keep an eye out. They do mention that Ford CEO recently mentioned that they want to localize the mining and processing of materials here in the United States. Most processing happens in China. So while mining happens all over the world, they usually send all that raw material to China to kind of get processed. And then because it's so close, that usually ends up where the full battery gets manufactured. So one thing that's happening globally as well is we are seeing more incentives for certain of those processing and mining to come back to domestic or near domestic lands. I also saw another interesting article, and I just wanted to kind of pull main points. This was from IEEE. IEEE is a great organization for electrical engineers, and they kind of did a report where they talk about gallium nitrate and silicon carbide. And it was a piece. The article was kind of talking about how these two materials in the future, it doesn't matter which one, will probably dominate the green tech market. And while maybe as some investors you might not that might not be a topic of investment. That does push to the front if you are bullish in the EV space. One of these two players are going to be the leaders there. Just a quick highlight: they do mention some of the pros of silicon carbide. One of the main pros is that they have very similar structure to your traditional silicone, so it makes it very easy to adopt to current to current changes. So that's a huge pro. Then the pro with gallium nitride is it has it the product, the material itself is efficiently higher in all aspects. Unfortunately, because it's better at higher electron mobility and kind of other switching speeds, that comes with safety issues where at the moment they're unable to kind of have a fail safety side on products like that. So that's kind of the main concern at the moment. So in this article, they do mention that, hey, maybe right now silicon carbide has a huge lead, but we will have to see how some of the other materials kind of evolve in the upcoming years. They also kind of talk a little bit of some of these materials of where they're being used. For example, in the EV industry, inverters and converters are being used by Tesla, Mercedes-Benz, and all these big players that are in the EV market. They also kind of name drop a few companies: Infineon, onsemi, Rom, Wolfspeed, for the silicon carbide. Then for the gallium nitride, they talk how in EV inverters, this is something that they're still not good at, but something that the market is trying to develop by 2025. So I guess if one is looking for specific markets, definitely interesting to find a semiconductor company that's maybe dealing with both to some extent. Then they also mentioned the electric grid applications that silicon carbide is currently dominating right now, and they expect it to dominate for the next decade or so. So again, it was more just informative information about, hey, the automobile industry, how it's growing, and some of the challenges and future growth potentials that can come with this market. I'll pass it over to you, Billy, first. Any thoughts with what I shared? Or
I want to thank the Motley Fool for sponsoring this video, and check out fool.com/Jose for the 10 best stocks to buy now. With that link, you get a promotional offer for their subscription service. Now, let's continue with today's episode.
Yeah, I actually took a look at that article as well. It seems the author is making the case that gallium nitride may advance to the point where it starts to intrude on some of the markets that we think silicon carbide is going to dominate. Because I guess all things being equal, you would prefer gallium nitride because it's less expensive to make. It's just a question of it has the certain types of capacity that silicon carbide can provide. So I think if everyone's bullish on silicon carbide stocks, you probably want to keep an eye on developments with gallium nitride chips as well. There are a few companies, a lot of the silicon carbide players also participate in gallium nitride technology. One off the top of my head is a company called Coherent, which used to be 26. They merged with Coherent. So they're one I think that has both. It's just very interesting because we all know everything's going to be electrified. We just don't know exactly how. So you're going to want to keep track of that development. And if you have a company that's all in on silicon carbide and then suddenly gallium nitride makes that breakthrough this guy's talking about by 2025, you might want to perhaps rethink that. Anyway, not to say that gallium nitride is going to take over silicon carbide, but it's definitely a contest you're going to have to keep track of over the next couple of years.
Thank you for that, Billy. Nick, any thoughts here?
Yeah, I will mention that article where you pulled some of this info from, Jose. The author actually is the co-founder of a chip company startup called Transform, and they're betting on gallium nitride. So there is some bias there that's mentioned. But what is interesting here, a lot of existing companies see the trend happening and are pouring a lot of money into one or sometimes both silicon carbide and gallium nitride. So I think this is one of those situations where I'm not sure that there's going to be ever going to be a clear cut winner. That's maybe like saying like back in like the 70s and 80s, like who's going to be the winner in silicon? Well, pretty much the whole chip industry was a winner. Everyone who like started adopting silicon as a substrate has done pretty darn fantastic. So it's an interesting thing to keep track of. There are a number of startups, a couple of them that have had an IPO that are betting on one or both. And I would just maybe point out to investors, be wary of the hype surrounding this. Kind of like how you maybe had to be wary of the hype surrounding cloud stocks, especially in 2020 and 2021 when we had all this flood of IPOs and everyone was like a cloud-based company and therefore you should invest in it. This is kind of like that in the chip industry. Someone says, oh yeah, GaN and silicon carbide, that's what we do, so invest in us. One that comes to mind is a company called Navitas or Navitas, ticker symbol NVTS. I have not done enough digging into it yet that I want to say it's not a buy, but this is definitely one where they have like a portfolio of gallium nitride and silicon carbide chip designs, and that doesn't make it an automatic purchase just because of that. So maybe just something to bear in mind with this. But overall, the industry, I think, is going to benefit, and the economy especially is going to benefit a great deal from this transition to some of these new substrates.
Thank you for that, Nick. And I agree, right? I mean, I think the here is just to showcase, right, that there's multiple solutions in this space. So I feel like sometimes in this industry, we kind of get laser focused on on one solution and believe that's the clear winner. And here we can see that this can kind of go in any direction. So there's always risk to any market. Just a final question for either of you guys. I feel like you guys do follow certain companies that are in the GaN or silicon carbide market, but do you guys look at companies a little bit higher in the kind of EV market, like some of these batteries or material companies? Or if you guys want to just share a few, it's not a market I follow too much, so I definitely would like to learn. So, Nick, I see you shaking your head. I'll pass it your way first if you have any thoughts there.
Well, as far as like a base materials company, I love a stock called Albemarle, ALB. They're one of the emergent leaders in supplying lithium. Maybe you've seen it pop up in the news in the last week. They made a buyout offer that was rejected by a very small peer, pre-revenue, I should say peer. Yeah, it's kind of another ancillary play. It's maybe adjacent to the chip market, I would say. That's one that I like in the base materials market. So I'm kind of sidestepping GaN and silicon carbide, and I kind of like lithium producers.
Thank you for that, Nick. And maybe in the future episode, we can probably, I mean, this is more just an idea generator, but maybe in a future episode, we can take a closer look at certain companies within that industry. If maybe some of the viewers or listeners want to hear about that. Billy, any on your end?
I haven't really gone into more of like the commodity or commodity processing companies, truthfully. I mentioned a company called Coherent, which, I mean, they make chips, but they're very much into sort of the materials processing and then making it into sort of basic chips and systems. That is one. That's probably the closest I've gotten to sort of these materials or materials processors. A lot of them are again like overseas from China. I think there was an article this week about Japan also inking potentially a trade agreement with the U.S. So that materials processed in Japan can qualify for Inflation Reduction Act stuff because they're an ally. So a lot of these companies are overseas, and I haven't really kept close tabs on a lot of the ones that are closest to the commodities.
Thank you for that, Billy. So I think that ends this topic. And